Base has dropped on another edition of Soccer Down here. It's a Wednesday. That means it's a Wall Pass Wednesday. So you guys are a big part of the show today. You send in your questions, you send in your comments. We're going to get into those wherever you want to take it. And there's a lot of stuff to get into today. We have quarterfinals set in the MLS's back tournament. At least one team that was favored to go very deep is out on penalties. Another team that wasn't favored to get out of the group took it to penalties, and that game got weird. But MLS After Dark is generally weird. We've got lots of rumors to talk about, too. Silly season is really getting silly to kick things off. Lots of stuff, and wherever you want to take it, there's stuff from soccer around the world as well. There's a lot of different things on the sheet today. So if you want to be part of it, you can do that a few different ways. You can tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. John's doing like finger guns at me, and it's kind of unnerving at times.
No, I'm counting off.
Okay. You can send an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com, and you can also watch on Twitch, twitch.tv/soccerdownhere. So let's start with the games last night.
Let's start with the games last night.
Let's start with the late one. Cincinnati is a limited squad at the moment. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. And it's not easy to do what Cincinnati has done in this tournament effectively. You're not just putting guys behind the ball and saying you stand back there and you don't run anywhere and you kick everything that moves and that's it. No, there's far more to it than that. Don't diminish the efforts of a manager who sets up in the bunker and plays this way. But it's offensive to anybody who likes anything resembling the sport of soccer because it is maddening. I give Cincinnati credit to get to this point. I give Cincinnati a ton of credit to take it to penalties. They should have won in regulation, but they're very high-priced forward that is on loan with an option to buy. Oh, man. It's guided. Taylor Twellman had a great quote, or a great tweet after this. If that was Jossie Zardes, there would be memes upon memes upon memes upon memes and pictures and videos and probably 2-hour deep dives into his first touch. That was horrendous from Jurgen Locadia.
Yeah.
That game was just insane. And what in the world was Steve Clark thinking? Steve Clark has had a really good career. Came to Columbus, got them to MLS Cup in 2015, and then did something very similar to this, and Portland got the early lead. Then bounces back, goes to Portland, big part of their success, and then does something like this. Wow. That's what's so crazy about this game last night is it shouldn't have even got to the point that it did. Steve Clark gave a gift, completely changed the momentum of the game. Then Cincinnati should have won the game. Then that didn't happen. Then it goes to penalties. And once it went to penalties, you could kind of tell. That's a tough spot for Jurgen Locadia to come back up and take a penalty. I'm a little surprised he took it at that spot because he'd already made one. So you're already thinking, do I do the same thing? Do I go the other way? What do I do here? You're already in your own head. And then you also had that horrendous miss. So you're probably in your own head for a lot of reasons. I wouldn't have put him up to do that. I definitely wouldn't have had Kendall Waston go up. I mean, when he starts walking up, I'm like, why? What? He's not popping the ball up and heading it in. Like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Bad choices on the penalty takers, and Clark makes the big save on Locadia. He does go the other way from the penalty took in regulation, and Waston puts it over the bar, and Portland ends up winning. That game took a lot of different turns, and I'm just glad the team that plays defensively. Portland can play very defensively, but there's more of a plan coming out. There was a comment last night that grabbed my attention. Now, Cincinnati opened up a little bit more as the night went on, as the game started to get stretched. But the first half, it was, Cincinnati's not playing direct as much. They're trying to play out. Well, they didn't have a choice because they had 10 field players within 40 yards of their own goal. There's nobody to play direct to.
Yep.
And the two up top were midfielders. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, you're playing a 5-3-2-0 because you don't really have forwards with Regaton and Kubo up top. They're not traditional forwards. So it's like, I mean, I guess you want to throw them a bone and give them credit for trying to play out, but they didn't have a choice other than just kick the ball through the imaginary screens or kick it as far down to the other end of the field as you could because there's nobody to play direct to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I understand it. I get it. I give them credit for doing what they got to do. That's what you have to do. Greece won a European championship that way in 2004. Other teams have won trophies this way. Sometimes it's all you can do because you're just flat out not good enough. Doesn't mean it's fun to watch. Doesn't mean it's enjoyable. And that's what we saw last night. It did have the crazy. I mean, I'll give it that. It had the crazy, so the last 15 minutes or so was entertaining because it was nuts. But, I'd rather see a more compelling match. The first one was a better soccer match, even with Minnesota playing defensively, but not like Cincinnati.
Yeah. So I anticipate.
Is that Yopstom calling you right now?
Well, it's probably Yopstom calling me, and the yard guys who will be visiting you by the end of the show are with me right now.
Probably. Why don't you hold them over there for a while?
Yeah. I give Cincinnati. I look at Cincinnati in situations like this, and
because of Cincinnati, I have to open a peach Red Bull because, man, that was.
Well,
I was hoping to be asleep a lot earlier than I was last night.
You have yours, and I have mine, and so I had to go straight to the Mountain Dew this morning.
You always go straight to the Mountain Dew.
Actually, no. The last couple days I've gone the other direction, and I've had whatever was in the cup. It was Diet Pepsi. So
wow,
I know.
At John.
I'm trying to finish what's in the cup before I go to the Mountain Dew, and so that's what's in the cup, and that's what happens. So now I look at Cincinnati through the prism sometimes of college football, and it's like trying to prepare for the triple option or something like that. That the offense that isn't there except for that one time on your schedule. And playing against that, you can't really simulate it, and it's frustrating as hell, and it takes an incredible amount of discipline to go up against something like that and feel like you're banging your head against a wall for 90 minutes and then trying to get the anticipated result that everyone who's watching thinks should happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I give Portland a lot of credit for just having the discipline and the stick-to-itiveness to just kind of sit there and keep banging your head against a wall. Steve Clark, you get no credit for, especially after the moment that you had in the second half. But with Cincinnati specifically, there were moments where Przemysław Titon had to come up big to preserve the draw, and he was strong in net at times when he needed to be. But the questions that I had for you coming into this morning were, did Kendall Waston's PK finally land? And
allegedly.
And then just Jurgen Locadia. I mean, going backwards, the PK that he took looked like he chunked it almost, where it just like he hit the ground first, then hit the ball because it had nothing on it. Steve Clark went the right way, and there was nothing there. Waston didn't look like the most confident penalty taker. Locadia didn't look like he was the most confident taker. And just going backwards, Cincinnati had their moments. I mean, the Duplon set piece where he was just offside, where everyone thought the match was going to be tied and things like that. But I give Portland a lot of credit once again for their stick-to-itiveness and understanding what Cincinnati was bringing to the table. For them to have gotten as far as they did in the tournament, I give Jaap Stam a lot of credit for understanding what his limitations are with his roster, getting the most out of it with game plans, and getting them to that point.
Lots of sadness from the experts and lots of maybe revisionist history a little bit about Columbus losing to Minnesota. Nobody really gave Minnesota much of an opportunity to win this. That's accurate. And Minnesota likes to play the underdog. Adrian Heath likes to bring up that nobody likes the Loons, and the players buy into it. It's a rallying cry. We get it. Yeah. But that was the case going into this. A lot of people had crowned Columbus as a contender to be in the final here. Now everybody's on LAFC.
Yeah.
I wasn't convinced of Columbus because I worried about them in a game like this, in a tight game. I'm not convinced of LAFC because of their defense. I think it's just they're going to give up goals to good teams, and are they going to be able to score enough? They can score a lot, but, man, they give up some bad goals too. But Columbus last night, I thought Minnesota should have won in regulation. They couldn't see the thing out. They then had to go to penalties, and they do get it done. Columbus was really good in the tournament, but I don't think they're complete yet. Maybe they get complete with this group. Maybe they get complete in this upcoming transfer window. They just feel like they're not quite there. They have had some injuries in this tournament as well. They're not 100%. I don't know if really anybody is at this point because you're playing games in a short period of time. Conditions are difficult, take a little bit more out of you. But Columbus was very good. They weren't good enough to beat the Loons last night. The Loons are a contender now to win this thing.
I look at the Loons defensively, and they were absolutely stout last night. And I honestly thought that they should have scored more than they did. There was the opportunity. I want to say there was about 30 minutes left. Lud had scored his first one, and then there was the chance that he had. I thought he should have taken a shot instead of trying to cut it back and pass to give Amaria the opportunity to put the second goal in the net. I think that Lud had more of an opportunity to put it in the net for his second. And I understand the notion of getting Amaria involved also. But I thought that Minnesota should have distanced themselves further in the second half. And looking at Columbus being frustrated by the defense that we saw last night from Minnesota, once again, I raise my hand and sit there and go, nicely done by Minnesota, even though you have the underdog trademark talked by Heath on a daily basis. But it was just one of those nights where you sit there. For me, Columbus, we know what they're bringing to the table, and they just run into a fantastic defensive effort by Minnesota. And as I said, I think Minnesota should have won it in regulation as well.
Jose Aja has generally been better than I expected in this tournament, replacing Iko Parra. He gives up the penalty and just a bad decision. No need to make the tackle that he does. Mm-hmm. That gives the lifeline to the crew, but they're not able to do anything else with it. Minnesota goes through. We'll get into the quarterfinals. We'll preview all of that. The wall passing is in motion, so let's get into that a little bit. Over on Twitch, Bernd Dursberger starts it off with, Jason, could you please analyze why Atlanta United 2 did not do as well against Battery when compared with the Memphis game? Same lineup formation. It just didn't click. I hope you guys have a great call tonight. Sometimes it's just hard for a young team to repeat performances game after game, especially when you add in the variables here. I think the biggest variable, to be honest, is Stephen Glass in the stands, not on the touchline.
Yeah.
Everything happened in the afternoon on Friday. That's going to affect a young team. Now, these guys are not first-team players, but they're there. They're around it. They're around all this. Now they know that their manager is going to move up. That was, I'm pretty sure, known on Friday. That's why he was in the stands, not on the touchline. So, this is a really interesting situation for a group of very young players, and sometimes it's enough to throw it off. I also think Charleston's just a very organized team, especially at home. They know what they want to do. It's not always the prettiest soccer. They do get numbers forward, but they're very organized. They're very consistent, and when they get up on you, they're a very difficult team to come back on. And I felt like the Atlanta United 2 squad that day just wasn't able to really get much going once they fell behind.
Yeah, and to all of the intangibles, and let me go off the pitch here for a little bit. The stuff that you got into a little bit. You're talking about teenagers who are hopping on a bus as a group, going to a city that is however far away it is on a bus ride, because you're talking stops and meals and things like that.
Well, no, you're probably not talking stops and meals and stuff. You're on a bus. It's not like me or you driving where,
Or stretch your legs or something.
No, there's probably not much of that, honestly. But still, it's like a 4.5, 5 hour trip. I would think.
So if you're getting a bunch of teenagers on a bus or multiple buses, we don't know about the social distancing. And
probably two, maybe.
Yeah. So you're thinking two buses. You're taking a teenager, putting them in this situation, putting them on a bus, 5-hour ride, strange city, day before a game, trying to get ready for a match where you're on the road, no crowd, your manager is the guy that you've been learning from is in the stands. He's not on the touchline giving you instructions. All of these intangibles, to me, kind of contribute to. I mean, think about it. Put yourself in a teenager's shoes, or cleats in this case. How would you react if what you're doing is you're trying to play a sport you love, you're a part of an organization, and then you have all of these intangibles and the upheaval of the business world added to all of this, where Stephen Glass is he's not going to be with you. The guy that you're used to getting instructions from is not going to be there. And while Henry is a part of that discussion, you're used to having Stephen Glass there. And all of this disruption is contributing to all of this. And I just think it was a very tough environment for those teenagers to be in, to try to perform. And so I just think that that was, for me, that was one of all of these intangibles just kind of went into this one large lump. And it was, for me, one of the contributing factors to the whole thing.
All right, Ricky Ricardo, rate the rumors. We've had a couple questions about all the rumors with silly season getting nuts. Rate the rumors. Gonzalez, Perez, Torres, Cahill. Okay, so let me see if I can remember.
So Gonzalez, Perez,
Well, yeah, that's not somebody's name.
Yeah.
There is nobody I know of named Gonzalez, Perez, Torres, Cahill. So, yes, there are 4 different rumors right now. Cahill came from Christian Dyer, who covered Cahill when he played for the New York Red Bulls, a rumored candidate for manager. I added him to the list. He wasn't on the list before.
Right. Yeah.
Cubo Torres came from Mexican media reports. He is out of contract. He was last with Xolos, played in MLS with Chivas USA, played in MLS with the Houston Dynamo. Perez, we talked about yesterday. Gonzalez, we've talked about. So I think those two you're up on. The Torres and the Cahill ones were new ones after we went off the air yesterday. Rate the rumors in terms of likelihood, maybe. I'll go Gonzalez, because the reporting is that's pretty close to being done. It'd be a loan with an option to buy. Yeah. He's not playing at Monterrey, so they would be willing to loan him for now. He's not playing, so he's not helping them, and he's not helping his value to sit on the bench. So if he's able to come to Atlanta and play, which if you're going to get him on loan, you're thinking you're probably going to play him a good bit to see what you got. I would go Gonzalez. So that would mean Perez would be behind Gonzalez in that, because I don't know if you bring both in because they play similar positions. I'd put Torres ahead of Cahill because it just makes sense. You have Joseph Martinez injured. You have a guy on a free who scored double-digit goals in this league multiple seasons. I don't know if Cubo Torres is the greatest fit here, and I don't know where his head is, where his form is, because he's only played like 25, 26 games since leaving the Dynamo at the end of the 2017 season. He went back to Mexico and just hasn't played much. Hasn't scored much either. So, he's available, but is he helpful? And I haven't confirmed it. I tried to go back and see if I could find things. There was a report that came out that he would not take up an international slot. That makes him a little more valuable to you. Like I said, he played for Chivas USA, he played for the Houston Dynamo. There's probably a very good chance that he would not take up that international slot. Okay, cool. That helps you. That makes it more likely. I think it's still less likely than Gonzalez. So I would go Gonzalez, Torres, Perez, and Cahill. And the reason I've got Cahill at the end is just that he doesn't have experience. And, no experience, and his playing background is a little different than, what we've seen with the roster, what we've seen with previous hires. I mean, it's just it feels very weird. It feels like somebody who wants to go into management and is looking for that way in and has a way to start planting seeds through the media. And that's good. That's what you do. You want to put yourself into the shop window, but that feels like the least likely of the four.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Looking at the reports yesterday, was it Tuda that had the Gonzalez number between 10 and 12 or 10 and 13 million?
I've seen 9.
Yeah. So I saw 9, and the Tuda number was more than that. So
that's the option to buy. Let's make sure we've got to be clear. It's a loan with an option to buy. Have no idea if it's an obligation to buy. Have no idea if it's an arrangement where he would come on loan for this season and be bought ahead of next season. Don't know those details. But he would come in this season on loan. That's what's being reported.
Yeah, so he's one, and I would put Torres there at 2. I would have Perez at 3 and Cahill at 4.
I've seen some questions about salary cap, and I think that's another reason why the loan part would go in. If you're able to get him on loan and basically pull a Christian Pavón that the Galaxy did last year, where you know he's going to cost you eventually, but you want to get him now, you do the loan with Monterrey, you work it out to where it makes sense, but then you know, and this would maybe make it more of that obligation to buy, that he's going to take up a large cap number next year. Now, why is that? Why would you be thinking about next year and opening up cap? And that goes to Kevin from Charlotte's question on Twitter.
Yep.
You know, with the rumors of incoming players and with the Eric Lopez signing and how he would join the first team next year, who's on the outs this window? He says besides Barco, which is not a definite, but with these rumors, you kind of start to think, okay, maybe are things further along than they've been reported with an Ezequiel Barco. He's going to go to Europe. He's going to go to Europe. I don't think there's any question of that. The question is when, and the question is for how much. And does that number get to where you want it to get coming up in this window? Potentially. I think it's a pretty safe assumption that it gets where you want it to get before the start of next season. And if you're looking at a Gonzalez, for example, if it's a loan with the option, you can finesse numbers to make sure he fits this year. Then if he's a designated player next year, he's a designated player next year. I don't know if that would be the case. I don't know if even with that type of number that you're talking about, anywhere 9 to 12 million, if you're going to bring him in on a 5-year deal and you spread it, and again, we don't know what his salary is in Monterrey, but for a guy who's on the fringes of the squad, I can't imagine it's huge. I think there's always this impression that for that big of a transfer fee, that there's no way they would be able to be anything other than a designated player. If you do the long-term deal, which is typically what we see Atlanta United do, you spread it over the life of the contract. And let's say it's, you're able to find a way to make this work. Could you do it? It's tough in this case if the number is truly that big. I'm curious to see how they can do this. I'm also curious to see, and we've seen these little hints here and there, if things maybe change a little bit in terms of roster and construction and ability to spend and all those different elements. Remember, they added TAM after the last CBA was done to give teams the ability to spend more. Everything's changed, even since they started the CBA and even since they finally agreed to it. Could we see different changes? Lopez, for example, would be in that U22 initiative that we're expecting. So could he fit into that? Yeah, and that would take him out of a designated player spot. I don't think he was ever looked at as a DP. I think the number's small enough for him to finesse it. Gonzalez is going to be trickier, but can you find a way? Maybe. We'll have to see. But I think in terms of other guys who you're looking at, I think you're looking at players, if you're going to go get Gonzalez and Perez, then that's 2 players in the holding midfield. You're not going to keep all your holding midfielders. Just doesn't make any sense. It feels like you could be really looking to make some moves incoming and outgoing here. I don't know if there's a move on the table for Pity Martinez. I think it's unlikely. I think he's going to be a tough one at this point to sell for a number that makes sense. I think you want him in this group right now, and I think you want him as somebody to build around for a little while. So you want to get the best out of him. You want to get more out of him. You want to get more consistently out of him would be the better way to put it. So I'm not thinking about him, not thinking about Joseph. I mean, there's always the wild card of a player like Miles Robinson who will play in Europe. I think he's too good not to. But is now the time? I don't think you're going to get maximum value for him, so I'm not expecting that. Could you see a club come in for, an Eric Remedi, a Franco Escobar, a player at that level? I think it's always possible.
Yeah.
But the clubs that would be coming in for talent at that level, I would think it would be clubs from South America, and I don't know what they have to spend, if any. So I'm not sure. And Kevin asks, what would be the other moves? Because there's going to have to be corresponding moves. You've got no senior roster spots with Jurgen Damm's addition. You've got no international slots with Jurgen Damm's addition. Lopez is a whole nother question if he comes up on loan and how that works if he plays for the first team. That's something that we don't have the rule for yet, so we just don't know. That would be for this season. Next year, I'm not worried about international slots for next year. We'll get to that when you get to it. You can solve that problem easily. If you're going to add Gonzalez, he wouldn't take up an international slot. He would take up a senior roster spot. So how does that work? If you're going to add Perez, he would take an international slot. He wouldn't, or he would take up a senior roster spot too. So how would that work? If you're going to add Cubo Torres, we don't think he'd take up an international slot, but he'd be a senior roster guy too. So, at a minimum, I think you're probably looking for one more senior roster spot of somebody who's got to move, potentially two, in a wild scenario, three. That's a lot. But you're going to have moves that go along with incoming moves. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, as you were playing it out, it was for me. It was the idea of the senior roster spots, and I saw the same things that you did about Cubo Torres and the possibility of not taking up an international slot. But yeah, I mean, and there's always that move that surprises you when it comes to players outbound and teams that are interested. This front office is very, very good at keeping their cards close when it comes to anyone who's currently involved in the roster, regardless of which team we're talking about, whether it's the USL side or MLS. And so then you're going, okay, all right, let's figure something out. But yeah, for me, there's going to be a corresponding move. Obviously, everybody kind of gravitates toward Barco, but we'll see when it comes to anybody else in the interest. And you did mention with guys like an Eric Remedi, that South American variant that we see. But yeah, to your point, once again, the economics of it all, whether those clubs have the economics that can bring in a player like that? Can they continue to chase players like that in this current environment?
Yeah, the Gonzalez one is the one that's a little tricky in terms of making the money work. If you're trying to keep him from being a designated player, it's going to be difficult. It's not totally impossible if maybe some of that transfer fee is a loan fee and you're able to work some things out. I don't know. I would assume you would try to because it'd give you maximum flexibility. But if you're expecting that Barco would go, then you can make that work. I easily think you can see a scenario where he is not a designated player this year and could be next year if the transfer goes down. So We'll have to wait and see on how all that functions because I think MLS is probably going to have to figure a few things out on their roster side anyway. Ricky Ricardo says, I know we're excited to see Tony Annan be on the touchlines tonight. Do you think we will see anything significantly different from what Glassy was doing in terms of how they play? No, not in the short term because he just hasn't had really much training with them. Could you see them line up in a little bit different shape? Sure. I mean, could you see the team look a little different? Potentially. But I'm not expecting anything drastic yet because they played Friday night. They came back Saturday. There could have been a region Saturday. They might have trained Sunday. They probably had a good training session Monday, walk-through, light session yesterday, play today.
Yeah.
Just not a lot of time. You come in, you kind of want to keep things moving. And Tony's going to be there on that interim basis. So he's in the role that Glassy was in before. Now, the thing is, we don't know what changes Glassy's going to make to the first team because he's going to have that opportunity to line them up differently, play a little differently, all that's on the table. So Tony would then be matching what Glassy wants to do. So tonight I'm not expecting much, but over time, if let's say Glassy moves them to play more of a 4-3-3, well, that's going to make sense for Tony to play the same to match up because he's going to get some first-team guys down with him at times, I would assume. there's some things that are going to be tricky with that, though, and I think we've actually maybe kind of seen it with, or I don't know if we've seen it, but it would make sense. The USL and the MLS testing and protocols are different. There's different levels of testing. There's different setups. So it's one thing to go from MLS to USL. I don't think that's as tricky. So once you get to a point where MLS players are coming down on loan to play for the twos, that's not that difficult. But USL players going up, or in Steven's case, a USL manager going up, it's like you're coming into the team, and it's like the typical protocols where you've got a test to come into the door, you've got to have, I think, 2 tests in 72 hours, that kind of thing to get in. So it's all kind of weird. Like, it's 2 different universes, and in Atlanta United's world, like, they're next to one another. So it's like you have to keep them separate because they're on different protocols and different situations, but you need to have some interaction, or at least you'd like to, because that's typically what you do. So it's really awkward with that. That's all down the road. I think tonight Tony Annan probably takes his knowledge of individual players and does he maybe move one guy to a different spot? Potentially. But in terms of dramatic changes, no, I'm not expecting it tonight.
From our friends at Odds Portal, the aggregate lists Atlanta United 2 as a plus 168 this evening. The Miami FC is listed
Correct.
as a plus 121, and the draw option is a plus 254, and it will be the chance for anyone who wants to catch the action from the fraction to hopefully get a look at Romario Williams. It'll be the first match for the Miami FC after the return with the restart in USL Championship. So it'll be interesting to see how Miami FC lines up, but it should be the chance for everybody to take a peek at Romario as well tonight.
Cassidy talking about 2004 Greece, which is what Cincinnati reminded me of last night in this tournament. He says, Greece was fun for the Greeks to watch. That's about right. Yeah. Wasn't fun for anybody else. It was fun in that final if you didn't like Portugal and if you were the Cristiano Ronaldo hater.
Yeah.
And there were a few after, just at that point, 2004, he was he just starting to break into Manchester United, or was it even before that? I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look. But he's always had haters. So, like, people who didn't want to see the home team win that tournament, maybe they were pulling for Greece through gritted teeth. And
yeah, well, it's ABC, I would think, at that point. Anybody but Cristiano.
Maybe. That was still young for him. I don't know how many haters he had. Abby says the weather's not supposed to cooperate tonight for the game at the Fraction.
Stop it.
Yay. I'm excited about that.
Stop that.
It's a game in Kennesaw. It always happens. It's nothing new.
The microclimate that is the Fraction. Yes, it is. Everything could be fine down at the Braves ballpark, but
the
for
microclimate,
us,
that is a John word.
Delay.
Yeah. That is one of your terms, a microclimate.
It's what it is. You have
never heard that before.
You have little pockets of weather that you drive through it and it's just there. There's no movement to it or anything. There's one that is at Spaghetti Junction for those from watching, those who know their Atlanta geography.
Why is it a microclimate?
Just because
it's just
there.
Because?
Well, I don't know it might be because of the makeup of you have like forests and subdivisions and development all in this one area, and it just kind of I mean, you know how it was at Silverbacks Park, where you'd have absolute gully washers, and then 5 minutes away you'd have absolutely nothing. So that's one. Maybe it has to do with just soccer stadiums. I don't know. Silverbacks Park had a microclimate. The Fraction has a microclimate where you could be, like I said, you could be at the baseball stadium. It's not raining. At our place, we're under a 3-hour delay. So, I think there should be a study commissioned by the National Weather Service about soccer stadiums and weather conditions and why it is that thunderstorms and delays are always at soccer stadiums and never at baseball stadiums. And to answer your Cristiano Ronaldo question, he started playing in 2003 with Portugal.
Well, no, with Portugal, I knew that. It was when he went to Manchester United, John.
Manchester United was 2003.
Okay, so yes, he was getting haters.
Yes.
And during that whole discussion of microclimates and your hypothesis about them, this was my brain.
Now I hit the rim, it's boom, click and go back this way, boom, here, click and go that way.
I got nothing.
Dennis Rodman, the geometric genius when it comes to rebounding.
We'll ask him to explain microclimates next time.
I'll get him some chamomile tea and a tuna sandwich from Subway, and he should be able to hang around.
Yeah, and probably a few other things. Burned and Abby like the Argentina 1986 shirt that I've got going today. It's from Retros y Rarezas. I put it in the Twitch chat, retrosyrarezas.com. They've got a bunch of like recreated retro shirts. A lot of Salvadoran shirts, which is very cool. I might have to get an Alianza one here at some point.
There you go.
They've got some early MLS stuff, some Mauricio Cienfuegos stuff because he's a Salvadoran legend. Some really cool stuff. I've got a couple shirts from them. It's good quality. It's good price. It ships really quick. I think they produce their stuff down in El Salvador. Great. I highly, highly recommend them. Bernd is also asking me to retire my Real Madrid jersey. He is saying this because he is a Barcelona fan since 1979. Bernd, I'll wear it tomorrow for you. It's all good.
That Alianza Orange Crush replica, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, any team that has Orange Crush as the front of the shirt sponsor is pretty cool.
Yeah, but I need the darker one. I see if the second I get a white jersey, I spill food on it or spill drinks on it, and it's forever soiled. So I need the away version of that one.
Ricky Ricardo's got my back on the Real Madrid kit. Abby says the Friday night game with Orlando and LAFC will be interesting. I completely agree. I want to see what Pareja dials up for LAFC.
And I think that once again, with LAFC, for me, be physical with them from the absolute beginning. Don't let them get into their rhythms. Get the professional fouls squared away. Don't let anybody run away from you. Bump them off. Just knock them in the hip. Get them off their game from the beginning. Don't let them get into any kind of a rhythm if you're going to have any kind of a chance against that offense. Because when that offense starts floating, it can be very, very pretty to watch. Just how effortless it looks, especially with what we've seen from Rossi. But just be physical with them from the absolute beginning. And early line right now has LAFC at -112.
What's the other side of that?
Plus 245 for Orlando City to win.
That's interesting. That's an interesting number. I want to see where that goes.
On the draw.
No, I don't think it goes to a draw. That's interesting. I'll be curious to see where the Orlando line goes. For that game, for me, it's going to be down to Sebastian Mendez in the midfield for Orlando. If he is able to disrupt LAFC, he's going to cause them problems. Nani will cause Tristan Blackman and the right side of LAFC's back line a lot of problems. It's a shame that Joao Moutinho at left back isn't really a guy who bombs forward a ton. You'd like to put Blackman and Dejan Jakovic under a ton of pressure. That's the way I'm expecting Orlando to try to deal with it. Mendez, physical, disrupting in the middle, getting under the skin of Atuesta, getting under the skin of Mark Anthony Kaye, frustrating them. Chris Mueller's got to have a big day. He's been big in this tournament. Can he continue? And you're looking for Nani and Mauricio Pereira to be your game changers. The other one that can be interesting with Orlando is Juan, the right back. LAFC wants to get numbers forward. If Juan can time his runs correctly, he's going to have a lot of freedom down that right side if he can get in behind Palacios. So I think Orlando can match up and give LAFC a tough one here, and I think Pareja, with more time to rest, with time to prepare, with a fresh squad, he can dial up something. They still have to execute, but they can give LAFC a very difficult night for sure. I'm not convinced that's going to be a blowout or just forget it. Four Card asked about the rumors with players coming into Atlanta United. Would that mean there are guys going to the twos? The two that you would look at to clear spots, but it's not going to affect the guys coming in. The one that would be helpful is Lawrence Wyke because he's on an international slot. He's not in a senior roster spot. Neither is George Campbell. So Campbell going back and forth, I think, would just be for him to play. Wyke, if he went back to the twos, it would be to create that international slot. That's the only one that really makes any sense. You pull up the senior roster, and I'm looking at it now. I don't think there's anybody that you would want to loan for the season down to Atlanta United 2 to clear a spot. That would just make sense. I mean, you're not going to do that to Jake Mulroney. You're not going to do that to Anton Walks. Those guys are in international slots, but I don't think they would accept that, and they shouldn't. I mean, they're not at that level. Alec Can, you need him as the backup. You do have Brendan Moore, but Can would open up a senior spot, but you're not going to put him in that spot either. It's really down to Wyke and the international slots, the only thing you could grab. It's the only thing that you could get by sending somebody back to Atlanta United 2. So that's it. Lots of back and forth on Real Madrid and Atlanta's white and gold kit, and it's too Real Madrid-ish, and Byrne didn't like it, and all kinds of good stuff. Ricky Ricardo says, we expecting to see any first-team guys tonight for the twos? I'm not. I haven't heard anything about that. I'm not expecting it. I think you probably want those guys to spend as much time as possible with Stephen Glass right now to get ready for the season, which could be starting in 3 weeks or so. I think they need every bit they can get. The only ones that would make any sense to me in that regard would be somebody like Wyke, would be somebody like Campbell, who didn't play and maybe need a game here or there. But I don't know what this looks like yet, because I mentioned the protocols. I don't think it's as difficult going from MLS to USL because you're doing less testing in USL. It's once a week. MLS you're doing every other day, so 3 times a week. So you can fit into there. Your testing results should clear you, no problems. But then when you come back, are you going to have to go through, because you're in a different environment, are you going to have to go through that no participation until you've cleared 2 tests in 72 hours? Is the reentry into the MLS protocol going to slow everything down? That's the question. I don't really know. I don't know if we haven't had it happen yet. So I don't know what the background is on that. You've got the time to do it, but you don't want, a player like George Campbell, for example, who you'd like to get him a game. But if then, to get that game, he would then have to miss 3 days of training to do it, to go back into the MLS protocol, is that worth it? I don't think so. It's tough. And that's one thing that is very difficult with the second teams at the moment. If you send somebody down for a while, different conversation. But if it's just on a game-by-game, and I might be wrong, we just haven't seen it yet, but that's what we've seen for guys who are coming into MLS. If they are joining a team, if they were joining the protocol, remember at the very beginning, you had to test clear twice in a 72-hour period to be able to join the group. I would assume that's going to be the same for anybody coming back from USL, because you are interacting with people on a different testing regimen, a different world. So that adds another layer of complication. So I'm not expecting it tonight. I'll try to get some clarification once we're able to talk about this, because it hasn't come up until teams left the bubble in Orlando, because everybody took all their first-team guys down to play. So now it's like, okay, well, now what? How is this going to work? Because you want guys to get time, but you also have to deal with protocols. It's really challenging at the moment.
Kevin from Charlotte is talking a little meteorology with me. He says those are simply called thunderstorms, not microclimates.
That's what I thought.
And he says, you want microclimates, go to Salinas, Monterey, Big Sur, etc.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
That's what I feel like when I hear microclimate. And I'm like, what does this mean?
It just means that something's happening. Something's happening in your part of the world, and that's it. There's no movement. It's there. It disappears, and it goes someplace else. And Maybe I just feel kind of schleprocky, and it's just that gray cloud is always hanging over our games, where we always have 3 and 4 hour delays, and we have to take naps and those kinds of things to get a game done.
Nick Leafy's got your back. He says it's a known term in gardening, farming, and outdoor work, which I have no experience with, so that's why I don't know it. But I'm just confused and enjoying the back and forth because it's entertaining.
Let's see. Michael Ruiz says that he likes both the Jonathan Gonzalez and Cubo Torres rumors. I think we clearly know the talent Gonzalez brings. He also remembers Torres scored a decent amount of goals for Chivas USA back in the day, had a great season for Houston in 2017.
Back in the day, and the Houston one, man, there were a bunch of penalties in that goal scoring total. Torres is a talented player. It's just never been consistent with him. But if he's available on a free and he doesn't take an international slot, then you're talking about a different conversation. Jonathan Gonzalez is a talented player. I mean, you remember the back and forth between him and United States and Mexico and national teams. And now all that's stalled because he hasn't played enough to put his way into the Mexican national team. But this would be a move that is a young, talented player who, if you bring him in on a permanent, you could develop him and move him on. You could sell him at the end of all this. So that plays into something we're used to seeing Atlanta United do. We haven't seen them spend this kind of money on a player in that position, in a more central midfield, not a number 10, more of a 6-8 kind of role. We haven't seen that kind of spend there. But if you're able to spend more, if you've got the opportunity with the way the cap is being structured, with this U22 situation, with all these different things, maybe you have more to spend. Maybe looking forward, you've just got more resources to work with and you're able to make it work. I'm fascinated by it. It's an interesting piece of business. And the question that I had coming into this window for MLS as a whole was, you're going to get into these situations where teams are looking to cut money. They're looking to cut their spending. If they've got an excess of players in a position, they don't want to be paying somebody a decent salary to sit on the bench that they're not going to use. If they've got somebody they can sell and bring in revenue, they want to do that. Every team is looking to do that. And MLS is in a spot where you've got owners who are willing to put down an investment right now in a good market for them and go out and better their teams and then hope that you're going to get that return down the road with people back in the building, whenever that is, and with increased sponsorship, with all the increases that you're expecting to see over time. You're betting on that. That's a bet, and it's an investment. But right now, the market's really good for MLS to go out and do that on these types of signings. So we'll see. Four-Card asked about that U22 rule. It's separate from the CBA. So Four-Card said we've got the CBA, and it hasn't been 7 months. Things tweaked. It was right before the Orlando tournament that they finalized it. But that's separate. And what happens with this is a rule like that, it's like TAM last time, where last time MLS, the owners could do kind of whatever they wanted. They had the CBA, they had that framework, but they were able to add rules to increase spending in ways like the TAM rule. That had nothing to do with the CBA. Now, in the new CBA, there's at least, I think, an understanding that when the league does that, because remember, the players, the union, was not happy about TAM. They thought that took away opportunities for existing players to make more money. You can argue that either way. I think teams should have spent it more on existing players and keeping them at times. They didn't. But this rule, it's been talked about. It's not officially part of the CBA. It is a separate rule, but I think they have the go-ahead and they have the thumbs up from the union to implement it. So they can announce it whenever. I think teams are probably already thinking about it going forward. And we saw that with TAM. We've seen that over the league's history. So if you know it's coming, even if it's not officially announced yet, you're going to start acting that way. And I would assume that maybe either going into this window, which would be helpful for all of us, so then we'd know what teams are doing in this window in that regard. You're going to get an announcement. If you don't, I think you're going to get it at the end of the season or towards the end of the season as you start to go into prepping for 21.
I think that and you made an interesting point talking about owners and the willingness to invest. And I think that when you see owners currently in Major League Soccer who are bringing in players from other countries, bringing them in from other leagues. And this is the 3.0 discussion that we've had, where you bring in players knowing that if they continue to improve on the track that you think that they're going to improve upon, you can sell them on and then take that money and reinvest. And I think that in this market that we're currently in, I think that MLS owners who have already adapted to that mindset or see it in other owners and sit there and say, hey, maybe we should be doing that kind of activity too. I think that it creates an opportunity for those owners to continue to operate as they've been and continue to invest, sell off, sell on, move players on, reinvest, and continue their approach that we've seen. I just want to see where the economics of everything are when it comes to players that you anticipate getting an 8-figure return on. How close are you to your target number in the current environment? And where can you take that money and reinvest it in yourself to continue to build on the idea that you want in the first place?
MLS has always been a long-term play. That hasn't changed. So, I mean, owners are going to invest for the long haul. I think a lot of them are probably looking at a bump after 26 when the World Cup is here. So you're looking at the long haul. You're not – very few, I think, are looking at it in that way. Like, okay, if I go spend $8 million on this player, in 3 years I can flip it for 15. I think most are just – I can bring in this player who will have a market value later in their contract. We'll come to that when we come to that, but it's a time now to invest for the long haul, and I think you'll see that from some teams in the league. Chris Ashley with the best point. We didn't get into it yet because we haven't dug super deep into Cubo Torres. He is on the allocation list. Atlanta's number 21 in the allocation order. That he's on the allocation list because Houston made money on the transfer when he went to Mexico. So you would have to move up, or you'd have to have the 20 teams ahead of you pass on signing him, which I don't think is likely because that's a whole lot of teams. So you'd have to trade up to some point where we don't know, but that's going to factor into the acquisition of him. That's why I do think it's less likely than a player like Gonzalez, but the fact that you could get him on a free, you'd have to trade something to move up in the allocation order to some point, or you're going to have to work out a deal with somebody to use that spot, which they probably wouldn't want to unless they're in that like 10, 11, 12 range, and give them something. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but that's going to factor into that discussion. And that's a good point from Chris Ashley. Mr. Fantastic says this, and I did not hear it, so I am believing you, Mr. Fantastic. Hercules Gomez on ESPN said, Miguel Herrera will make a move to MLS for the Atlanta job since he highly respects the club and its drive to be one of the biggest clubs internationally. Be huge. I'm a little surprised that he would think about leaving Club America at this point to make a sideways move. I think is fair, and some people would argue it's a step back. I think it's a sideways move. I don't know if it's a bigger move than where he's at right now. I've had the opinion that he wouldn't leave Club America unless it's to go to a European job because he hasn't had that time. He hasn't done that. So that's what I'm expecting. Could he be tempted by Atlanta? Sure. I mean, Atlanta's a tempting job for anybody, but how different, how much bigger is it than where he is? And that I don't really know. I'm sure he is impressed. Being here last year, being in the venue, knowing what's going on with Atlanta. There's always been a bunch of rumors back and forth about Atlanta players going to Club America players coming here. All that's new, or not new. So could you see it? Sure. I don't think it's likely because I don't know if it puts him in a different place unless there are more issues with Liga MX and financials and maybe just predicting that MLS will bounce back from this quicker. I don't know. But I would think that he would stay where he is until a European offer comes. That's just my assumption on it.
Yeah. And looking at Herc's timeline, trying to find where that information came from, I have a question for you about what we saw last night separately. So let me know when you want to get into that.
Go ahead.
What did you think about the mic'd up conversation that we got to listen to between VAR and the center ref?
Okay, that's a completely different topic.
That's why I was saying. I mean, it's off to the side. That's why I was saving it.
Okay. It was good. It's something I think Twellman tweeted that it's something they've been wanting to do more of, but they have to get the buy-in from the referee side of it. It was presented well. I think you have to be careful with really difficult, controversial situations that you might want to not have the conversation live. You might want to use it in a replay scenario, which I'm fine with. If that's where the referees are comfortable, is putting that mic'd up audio in replay where it can be clipped, it can be edited, it can, you can protect people, that's fine. Because, I mean, the way it went, it clarified a lot of things. Like, it was very easy to follow. It made a lot of sense. It was also an easy decision, and that's a good time to introduce it for the first time. It's not one where there's a lot of back and forth, and then you could present that the referee's not getting along with his VAR. Oh, no, they disagree. You don't want to do that out of the gates. Is it going to happen? Sure. I understand the referee's reluctance because you don't want to make either the referee or the VAR look bad.
Right.
I think it should be in a replay situation. That would be the safest way to do it. This was an easy, obvious one that you could go ahead and roll with, and I'm glad they did. But you got to be careful with that. Referees, I mean, they're not generally arguing on these conversations, but it can get back and forth contentious depending on the situation, and you don't want to put a referee in that. So I get it. I get the reluctance. I'd love to see more of it. The one that got everybody excited was what Australia did with it, but they showed it in a replay scenario, which I think is the way to go, and that's where I would go with it. But this is a good step in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, and it was an interesting wrinkle. There are the dangers of live TV and the conversations that you're going to have, and you mentioned not wanting to expose the conversation and have one side or the other look bad. Monitor it, have it as an in-game element, have it a little further down the line, not too far so you don't lose the context of the event that you're with. I mean, don't show it like 9 minutes later. It's like, well, by the way,
I mean, if you have to show it at halftime, if you have to show it at the end of the match, that's fine too. You might not might not be able to, and that's okay.
Yeah. So with the hydration breaks, you have a natural element where you could do that too. But just if for me as a taped element, I'd love to see it, or a timely element, not necessarily a live element. But I love that they did it.
All right, tell us about our good friend Steve Apolinsky.
I've heard of him. Apolinsky & Associates, LLC, proud supporters of soccer down here in the SDH network. Wrongful death and serious injury matters. If there's one of those that you need to have a discussion with him, there's a couple different ways that you can do it. Go to the website, aa-legal.com. You go to the website, aa-legal.com. The second you get there, the URL, you hit enter, bam. I feel like Emeril Lagasse. Bam. Pop-up window, low right-hand corner. You can have an instant conversation with somebody. 24/7, 365, or 366 in years like this. Or you can shoot Steve an email directly. Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Get a free consultation that way. Or you can give him a call at 404-377-9191. Apolinsky & Associates, over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients in Georgia and Alabama. Wrongful death or serious injury matters. Recognizes Legal Elite, being one of the top 100 firms by Georgia Trend Magazine. Apolinsky & Associates, LLC, the website, aa-legal.com.
All right, we're going to cross our fingers and hope that the audio and connection gremlins don't bite us, as has happened a few times. If you're watching on Twitch, John might turn into a squiggly image here for a second. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
I'll try to bring in Mr. Mike Conti to join the conversation. Hopefully John's audio doesn't go all wonky either. It's been known to happen.
Wonky audio.
Sounds okay right now.
All right.
We are efforting. This is where a producer would normally do this, like while we're in a break. We don't have
you
one.
And I can talk, and we can filibuster until the individual.
Hey! And he is here.
Yay!
What's up, Mike?
What's going on, guys? How are you?
We're good. That all went pretty smooth. I was a little worried because usually John turns into a robot, and then we lose somebody, and no, it's all good. It worked out this time.
You ready for some action at the Fraction tonight, Jason?
I guess.
What's worse, action at the Fraction or the Miami FC?
That's a good question.
I believe it would be the latter by default, wouldn't it?
I get it. The Miami Football Club. Okay.
Not a Miami Football Club.
Yeah, it's just it reeks of Ohio State to me.
I was about to say that was your issue with it, right?
I mean, I have numerous issues with Ohio State. I think from the branding standpoint of a professional, sports team, we might be able to do a little bit better than the Miami FC. But hey, the name is one thing and how they play is another. So it's all good, I guess.
And Miami FC.
Hey, has anyone, by the way, talked about? It looks like, so far, mostly so good on the testing side with USL Championship. I think I saw their latest round. They have like 4 positives scattered between 4 different teams. That seems to be kind of okay, given what they're doing with the weekly testing and being in market and everything. I know there was some controversy about that Tormenta Richmond game last night, which I guess they went ahead and played.
They did. That got weird. The controversy was misplaced in some ways.
I think there was some incorrect reporting around that as well.
There 100% was.
Yeah, and that certainly creates a confusing situation to analyze. But I just, I was a little concerned about USL's plan and if it was enough. It seems like so far, depending on if you look at it glass half full, glass half empty, I tend to look glass half full. It seems like it's going okay, at least at USL Championship right now. So hopefully that continues. I know some of the USL clubs that are affiliated with MLS teams are using MLS protocols as the floor. So I don't know if that means like ATL UTD2 is being tested every other day as the first team would be or what.
Some teams are testing more than the once a week. That is definitely happening. I don't know if that's just a MLS second team situation or some teams are just doing more testing. I do still have concerns just because of it's one test a week, and I think as we see in some markets that can be a challenge. I think the part and the thing we're seeing with not a lot of positive tests and not a lot of postponed games is a credit to the players and the staff. For following the recommended behaviors off the field. Because I think, and it's come up in baseball now, it's going to come up in football, it's going to come up in any sport. The problem, and football's the only one that I really wish somebody would give us some real information like we have out of Europe on the amount of time you're around a player in a match, in a game. Because what we've seen, whether it was Rudy Gobert with the Jazz, whether it was positives in any league in Europe, whether it so far was the Miami Marlins, you're not seeing transmission because you're playing another team.
Nope.
It's not in a game where you're seeing transmission. It is all the things you do as a team. That's where the questions come up. That's where you have to think about separating guys sitting on the bench, wearing masks, how you do your meals differently, how you do your locker room differently, all those things. That's the risk. The risk is not from playing somebody else. That has to be understood and driven home. This is just where this whole lack of consistent information and credible experts to give us this so we can move forward in an organized way because, the whole thing with baseball. And, Mike, this was the maddening part to me about this. I want to get your take on how they've handled this because it will affect MLS. I think what's going on with Major League Baseball, MLS is paying very close attention to. When MLB, the Marlins part, totally get. Something's went wrong with the Marlins. They've got to figure out what happened. Yeah. But the whole part with the Phillies, they initially canceled the Monday game, and then they were going to play Tuesday. And then they decide, well, we better cancel Tuesday. And it's like there's no consistency. There's no plan.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, there's a plan. There are protocols. But what you're having in the case of the Phillies and apparently in the case of the Washington Nationals are decisions being made outside of protocols to go the extra step and cancel games.
Okay.
There's nothing in the MLB protocols that says, well, we tested the Phillies, they all tested negative, but the protocols say we're going to cancel anyway. That's not in the protocols. And I'll use an MLS example. When Toronto and who was it?
DC.
New England, the match DC, Toronto and DC, that match they scrapped at the very last minute, that Sunday morning down in Orlando, where it turns out you had false positives and all of that. But, there was a player on each team that tested positive. Now, the protocol said you isolate the players from both teams, or you isolate the players who tested positive. Everyone else you retest. If they come back negative, you play, which is what happened. But then you had a discussion, and the discussion led to a team not getting on the bus. And then you had to cancel the match. That wasn't in the protocol. So I think that's where you're seeing the confusion, Jason, where, MLB, just like MLS, just like I'm sure the NBA and the NHL and everyone else, NWSL, MLB has a plan in place for what happens if the virus rips through a team. Okay. It seems as though they took an extra step outside of protocols that affected the Phillies, the Yankees, and the Nationals. So we've got to get back to, are the protocols ironclad, or is there room for flexibility? I think that's the issue.
Okay.
That's where the confusion is. And I think that's where, maybe a commissioner or someone in the players union needs to kind of take the lead on this and just tell us, are the protocols malleable or are they ironclad? I would tend to hope that they would be ironclad because, they were not developed accidentally with no outside input from medical experts and,
right.
Health officials and everything like that. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, do you agree with me? I think as we look back at what happened with that Toronto DC match a couple Sundays ago, I'm not 100% sure that was handled correctly. They still ended up being able to play, I think, the next day, right? I can't, or maybe it was 2 days later.
They did.
But it had a trickle-down effect on the rest of the tournament. What's happened with the Marlins is going to have a trickle-down effect on the rest of Major League Baseball, where it's going to be impossible now for some teams to play 60 games. I did think it was noteworthy last night. Ken Rosenthal reported that the Players Union requested that the Nationals, the Yankees, and the Phillies get paid for the canceled games. But they did not make the same request for the Marlins. I thought that was interesting.
That's very interesting.
Mike, the testing numbers that you were referencing, Stephen Goff, USL Championship, 1,367 test players and staff, 35 clubs, July 13 through 20. 4 individuals test positive from 4 clubs, so 4 positives out of 1,367 tests in the championship. USL League 1, same time frame, 364 test players and staff, 11 clubs, 2 individuals test positive from 1 club. So you're looking 1,731 tests, 46 clubs, and a total of 6 positives from 5 clubs. So that's
and just to be clear, like ideally you want it to be 0.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing 17 on one club or 10 on one club as you had with Nashville, or what did Dallas end up being? 12 on one club. Well, you're not seeing that. Which goes back to Jason's point that it looks like, for the most part, everyone involved in this USL project is doing what they are supposed to be doing at the training ground and away from the training ground, and that's encouraging. But that's going to be the key to getting MLS back in home markets. It's going to be the key to getting college football started, key to getting the NFL started. I mean, everyone has to cooperate and comply and do their part. But I think we have seen now, with 29 other Major League Baseball teams going since at least Thursday without a single positive outside of the Marlins, and this includes travel for all 29 of those unaffected clubs, it seems to be working right now outside of the Marlins. Now let's give it more time and let's see where it goes from here. But I take that as encouraging. I think there was a clear sign that there was a breach of protocols with the Marlins somewhere, and it needs to be studied.
Yes.
It needs to be studied, same way as Nashville and Dallas. And I understand we don't want to embarrass people if they did something wrong, or, we don't want to come down too hard on pro athletes or coaches or staff members who are trying to live their lives.
But you
this
have
is
to
really
emphasize personal responsibility in these cases for the collective.
Well, and if we know what happened, we can avoid doing the same mistake.
Yeah.
That's all. If it does turn out that the Marlins all went and had a party in Atlanta Thursday night, which has been suggested by some on Twitter, and I don't know if that's what happened, but if that turns out to be true, okay, let's not crush the Marlins over that, but let's make it very clear to everyone else that, having social gatherings like that are going to potentially put your team's season at risk. That's all. You don't fine the Marlins. You don't kick them out of the league or anything like that. But we need to know what happened so we can avoid this happening elsewhere. And the more we avoid it happening elsewhere, the more proof we have that we can play on safely, and we can try to have some semblance of a season finishing out in Major League Soccer and the NFL, college football, and all of that, all the non-bubble sports.
It's this balance, and we've mentioned the studies from the Netherlands, from Germany, from the UK when they made their approvals of coming back to play, how players are not within 6 feet of another. The whole thing about 6 feet and wearing a mask, you're not wearing a mask, but you're not within 6 feet of one another for a 15-minute period. That's what the CDC recommends. So it's this balance of, yes, you're doing the testing. Yes, you are, acting as you're assuming that everybody is positive until it's confirmed they're negative. You're doing less testing in USL, which could create issues later. It hasn't yet, which is good. But in soccer, you're just not around players for extended periods of time. Other players, other teams' players. You're around, potentially, if you're not doing things correctly, your teammates more for that.
Same with baseball, right?
Yeah, baseball,
really
I think it's even more so. Like, football's the one that really somebody needs to be doing a study of this. Really, we need the information, because that's the one, just from what we all know of the way the game's played, where you're going to be around people for more extended periods of time in football. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, and you're talking about a very large amount of people. I mean, 22 players on the field at one time, plus 7 referees. A team's traveling party in college football, it's like 85 to 90. In the NFL, it's about 55 to 60.
The off-the-field part gets so much trickier with football because it's more people. The game part, it's more about the way the line of scrimmage functions for me. Is there more risk with football? Every sport is different, and every sport and the way they function is different, and we forget that part of the conversation, and that was the biggest issue with the Toronto DC thing, is you had to get those tests, the one that was a positive that later turned out to be a false positive, the one that was inconclusive. You had to get those players sorted out. They didn't play in the game when it did happen the next day. Those players did not participate. But the risk of transmission in a game is less than doing normal day-to-day activities.
Yeah, and there's another element to it, too. And I think this is something we're going to see in MLS, when they go to home markets, is you've heard a lot of talk in the NFL. I think the NFL's chief medical officer even said that we don't feel like we need to have a bubble because every team is kind of in their own bubble. Mm-hmm. I believe that to be true. I think one of the things you're going to see in the NFL is if you play if you're the Falcons, you play a 1:00 game at Tampa Bay, you're going to get on the charter Sunday morning. Okay, you're going to spend Saturday night at home in Atlanta.
Yep.
You're going to, test Saturday at some point, get hopefully a negative result. You'll go to the airport at 6 in the morning. You'll fly to Tampa. You'll get there at 7:30, 8 o'clock. You're on the bus straight to the stadium. You dress at the stadium. You warm up. You play. You undress and you go straight home. That way you're minimizing what may have happened to the Marlins, minimizing the risk of what may have happened to the Marlins, where you're at a hotel the night before the match and you're looking for something to do. And again, we don't know that's what happened to the Marlins. But again, I mean, if you're minimizing the amount of time that these traveling parties are spending away from home, you can do this. And I think what you're going to see in Major League Soccer is, I mean, if Atlanta United plays a 7 o'clock game on a Friday at Soldier Field, you get on the bus at 11 a.m., you're flying a charter, so you know you're going to get out. You fly up there, you land at 2 o'clock, and you bus straight to Soldier Field. You get dressed, you play, you undress, you go right home. You know, and if everyone has tested negative getting on that plane, then this should not be a problem, and you shouldn't have to worry about that inter-squad transmission. And this goes back to the NFL. You know, there might not be a way, Jason, where you can avoid that 15 minutes of close contact between teams in an NFL game. But if you have teams respecting internal protocols...
Right, then you're relying on that.
Exactly. And then you can minimize that risk of something going wrong between the time you test negative and the time that ball is kicked. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think we're going to see that a lot. And I don't even know what they're doing in USL Championship. I mean, it obviously puts a tremendous strain on the visiting team and may create a competitive disadvantage. But I think we've seen situations before where teams have bust in day of game. Did Charles not do that for the closed door match up here?
They did.
It bust in day of game. I mean, it's not ideal, but you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that your physio staff can do to try to minimize the impact of that day of game travel. But I think that's where we're going with this. And I understand that, you know, a lot of people are concerned about this plan to resume play in home markets, pointing to the Marlins as an example why it may not work. What I'm saying is you can avoid the problem the Marlins got into. Major League Baseball can't necessarily avoid it because you're playing 3-game series. You know, so you can't fly in if you're the Marlins, you can't fly into Philadelphia that morning and fly back to Miami that night. You're going to play 3 straight days there. The Major League Baseball schedule is not set up in such a way to allow for that day of game travel. And just for the record, I mean, Jason and I, we've been doing day of game travel for 3 years.
Our performances have been okay, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we aren't running and playing 90-minute matches and everything that.
But you're having to be on an adrenaline energy rush for X amount of hours, and there is no downtime until you're off the air and trying to find a restaurant in and around certain stadiums in Central Florida and getting kicked out of stadiums. So, I mean,
Well, I don't remember if we flew into Orlando that day or the night before. That one's a little fuzzy.
I think we flew in.
No, it was day of.
It was day of.
We had that god-awful dinner at Applebee's. Not because it's Applebee's, a very fine chain, just that particular Applebee's was struggling.
It was a sad Applebee's.
Yeah. But no, I want to just be clear. Like, I haven't been told that this is the way they're going to do it in Major League Soccer. I have heard anecdotally this is the way they're going to do it for most games in the NFL.
Yeah.
And just as Major League Soccer is probably going to be looking very carefully at what Major League Baseball is doing when they go into home markets, there's no doubt in my mind they're also going to look very closely at the NFL. Coincidentally, you have several MLS owners who also own NFL teams.
There's that.
So I think there's going to be a lot of benchmarking that occurs here. And I would not be shocked if that's the direction MLS goes, at least initially. I mean, we know that it's going to be intra-conference games only, so they've obviously had travel in mind when they've put this plan together. I think that's what you're going to do. And again, if you're playing on a Sunday night in Minneapolis and you're Columbus and everyone tests negative Saturday night, and you stay home and do all the things you're supposed to be doing, you, in theory, should not be bringing the virus with you for those 8 to 10 hours that you're on the ground in Minneapolis.
Here's the question I have, and we saw it in Germany going into the first week, where they didn't do a quarantine. There was an initial request to have all the teams go into quarantine for 2 weeks before the league restarted. They didn't do that. They did it for the week before. Now, I wonder if in MLS cases. Now, the testing results capacity is going to be a big issue here. How quick are you going to get these back? It's one thing in the bubble where you're contracting with a lab right there. It's another where you're market to market. But let's say you get that sorted out. Let's say you're able to get to where you're getting results in 24 hours. If you test on a Saturday for a Sunday game, you test Saturday morning, you have your walkthrough from a training perspective. You're doing everything from an intelligent way to minimize people being around one another for extended periods of time, because that's an internal thing. You know, the way you're dealing with your locker room, the way you're dealing with your meal, all that kind of stuff. But I wonder if you'll see, and the NFL could easily do this too, you do your testing before your last training session, or after, whatever the timeline works like. And then you go into a small bubble, essentially. You rent rooms at a hotel. You see teams do that all around the world, where the home team will stay in a hotel the night before their home game to bring the team together. It's very typical in South America. Do you do that to minimize, okay, we tested, and now we've put everybody away, and is that going to make it safer? You're going to see teams do everything possible.
Great idea. And, coincidentally, there's a big 500-room hotel right next to the charter terminal in Atlanta. So it could even buy your players a few extra minutes of sleep, which would be an added benefit, too. So, yeah, absolutely, Jason. I mean, I think all those options are on the table, and they're going to be studied. But, again, every day that goes by, and I tweeted about this last night, every day that goes by, really since the beginning of July, or late June, we've had 4 outliers, okay? Orlando Pride, Nashville SC, FC Dallas, and the Miami Marlins. Those are the 4 outliers. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, NWSL did not have a single positive test the whole month they were in Utah. I do understand it's a bubble, okay? MLS has gone 18 days without a positive. Again, I understand they're in a bubble right now, but you're starting to get teams back in the home markets and training again. And I know they aren't required to disclose test results, but we haven't heard of any, subsequent positive tests since these teams have gotten back in the home markets yet. NBA, they've gone since the 13th of July with no positives. Again, they're in a bubble. National Hockey League, they went into a bubble, but the last round of testing they had in home markets, it was like 4,000 tests, no positives. Okay, so the data and the evidence is overwhelming now that inter-squad transmission, one team to another, does not appear to be occurring. And if everyone is doing their part, obeying the protocols, respecting the protocols, whether they're at home or in a bubble, we can do this safely. There's overwhelming evidence now since June 26th. And people are pointing to, well, you have 24 Major League Baseball players on the COVID list right now. Yes, that is true. But, outside of I guess the Marlins are 17, so you're talking about 12 across the rest of Major League Baseball. These are all players who tested positive before games began. Okay? So, we're talking about isolated instances here. Isolated. You're not talking about a virus ripping through a league. Now, if that happens, then I think, we have to reassess where we are right now and find out what went wrong. But, since the start of team sports in this country, where the virus is not under control and certainly has not been under control all summer, we've had team sports in this country since June 26th, and outside of the 4 teams that I've told you about, one of them, by the way, may have been false positive from the get-go and may not have actually had a problem. We're doing it, and we're doing it in a way where, it's not causing widespread danger or risk or transmission or anything like that. And the numbers and the data back that up.
So what did you think about the tournament since we've last talked about the tournament?
It's getting better. It's getting to be a lot of fun. That Minnesota-Columbus match, that shootout was everything was fun last night. Cincinnati-Portland was fun.
The ending was fun. Watching Cincinnati find every bus they could and get a crane and stack them on top of each other and bore us all to tears.
You know why that was fun? Because it was so patently absurd.
Yes.
And from my personal standpoint, it proves what I was saying about Cincinnati when Atlanta United played them a week ago Thursday. That's not good. That's not good for the league. You get play entertaining soccer. Have a little more confidence in yourself.
You can be defensive and not be
not that was cartoonish. You can be defensive. That was cartoonish.
You can play defensive but not create atrocities against the sport.
I agree.
Please.
I agree. Now, all that said, you look at the 8 teams that are left. I would say if you would have told me before the tournament began that would be the last 8, I would have said, okay, yeah, absolutely. I see that with all 8, including Orlando. The 2 or 3 teams that I thought would still be alive right now that are not are Columbus, Atlanta, and LA Galaxy. But other than that, I mean, I'm not surprised with what we have right now. And I can't call it. I don't know who's going to be the favorite to win this. Maybe San Jose. I mean, it could be San Jose right now. But this has been a fun, balanced tournament with a very balanced, compelling knockout or first round of knockout games. Now we go to the quarterfinals. I just hope that, as this tournament wraps to its conclusion, in the World Cup, I always feel like your best match is a round of 16 and quarterfinals. By the time you get to the semifinals, sometimes
it's cagey.
Gets really cagey.
Yeah, it gets really tactical, or you can have Brazil give up a bazillion goals in their home country to Germany. I mean, it could be anything. I think you see a lot of good soccer and very free play and a lot of upstarts just kind of throwing the kitchen sink at a favorite in the round of 16 and quarterfinals. So we're at really the meat of the tournament right now in MLS. And I hope that people will give it a try. I know the TV numbers have not been what the league had hoped. But you're getting to a point, I think, this weekend where you're going to have some really good matches. And I hope people will give it a chance because what we've seen the last couple nights has been, I think, mostly good for the league.
Before you leave us, Mike, Harmless Bunny on Twitch has a question, and I'm gonna reframe it just a little bit. So, do we think that broadcasters should take a larger role in maintaining virus safety? Are there ways to, I don't know if it's punish teams that don't adhere to standards or what? I mean, you talked about it earlier with there are privacy laws. Like, it's not about pointing players out unless they come out and say, hey, I tested positive. Hey, I did this. So, what is our role in this, if there really is one, other than just talking about things as they develop and all that?
Report the facts.
Yeah,
Report the facts. Don't inject our personal opinions in it. Report the facts. There has been, from one national outlet in particular, a lot of injection of personal opinion and cherry-pick facts reported about how the virus is going to impact the MLS tournament. It has subsequently led to a non-apology from one of those writers. I think the best thing we can do is just report the facts straight up. We can talk about how we interpret them, but ultimately we need to leave it up to our viewers and listeners to decide. And again, when it comes to data, let's just report the data for what it is. We'll present the data, and then we can let our listeners and viewers make the decision. But I think, again, so much of what has been reported about the Marlins, about soccer, about football, is twinged with, an attitude from the presenter that this can or can't be done. And I'll admit, I definitely come from the side of this can be done. So maybe that is, been twinged in my reporting of it. I mean, I'll admit that, but maybe I need to do a better job. I don't know. I just think, report the facts and let everyone else decide based on the raw data. I think that's the best we can do.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference between all the different roles in that side. Like, what we do is not, what Doug does at a newspaper, for
No.
example, or what a media outlet like The Athletic does, or even, ESPN gets into, some tricky spots where they have reporters. They have people who are covering this from a news angle, but they also have people like Taylor Twellman, Alejandro Moreno, who are commentating on the games.
Right.
It's tough. For us, I feel like, I think they need to right now, leagues across all sports, need to find as many ways as possible to keep fans connected to the sport. And I thought, what Atlanta United did with, you and I doing the pre- and post-game stuff on Facebook Live and trying to add some other elements like that, those things are going to be key. And it's key to make it safe for people to enjoy the game at home safely, but still be connected. And it's this, in our role, it's so different because we're not out digging up like who tested positive and how did they test positive and all that. That's not what we do. But I think we do serve a pretty important function, and it's been really good to see, the coverage of these games, whether it's NWSL, MLS, baseball, the NBA coming up, all of it, where you're able to keep those local connections because that normal way of consuming these games, whether it's, for a home game in the stands or an away game, going to a bar, watching it with a bunch of friends, having a house party, those things aren't the best way to do it. So we're trying to keep you connected as best we can and do our role, but also understand that it's different than it was before. Right now it's different anyway.
It's very different. And it might be different for a long time. I hope it's not, but it might be different for a long time. But, I think maybe I misunderstood the initial question.
No, I think it's all of it. Like, that's the thing is this is such a wide-ranging topic, and everybody has to look at their role in sports, in my opinion, right now, because it's a critical time.
Yeah, I agree. And no one's right or wrong for feeling the way that they feel, by the way. People, that's the great thing about living in a free country. Like, we're all free to feel however we feel. I mean, if you listen to me over the last half hour talk about how I think we can do this safely and you disagree with me, that's fine. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion. If you agree with me, that's fine too. I'm glad you do. But that's fine too. You're entitled to your opinion. But, I think you bring up a really good point. As broadcasters, people are probably more dependent on us now than they've been in the past because they aren't able to attend the matches or attend the games or, go to whatever. So I think it's our job to try to present everything as we see it. Jim McKay used to always say that, when he was hosting or doing play-by-play, his goal, his job was to accurately describe what was happening in front of him. And if by the end he did that accurately and the viewer felt the same emotions that Jim McKay felt about watching it, then he did his job. And that's how I feel. Mm-hmm. Our job, at least my job, is to describe everything as accurately as it is seen through my eyes. And if by the end I've done that and the listener has an idea of how I feel about all of it without me telling them how to feel, then hopefully I've done my job. But again, I think it just goes back to it's very, very important that we present facts as they come into us without these little asides or remarks or some of the other things that I think we've seen lately that have been a tad bit unfair. And again, using MLS as an example, MLS has gone 18 days without a positive among a tournament participant in Florida, by the way. Protocols work. To have columns written about how dirty it felt to have the tournament, and then have the writers of those columns continue to make comments in their reporting makes me think that maybe those writers were not coming at this from a neutral perspective. So just my 2 cents. I think we all know who I'm talking about. And to their credit, lately when there have been positive rounds of tests, that particular outlet has reported on that too. And I'm glad to see that.
It's an interesting time for sports, and I think we're all kind of figuring out what the proper ways forward are. I think leagues are, I think teams are, anybody in the media side and whatever role they fill in it. It's different, and it changed suddenly, and I don't know when it changes back, but we're going to keep doing the best we can. That's about all we can do at the moment.
That's all we can do.
And just
Exactly.
tell you what we're seeing and what we're feeling and how it is, and we'll be there with you when the next Atlanta United regular season game is, which could be in 3 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I saw Stephen Goff's report today that maybe we'll get something by the end of the week, but it seems like this keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it sounds like the announcement of, yes, we're going to play could come by the end of the week. It sounds like a schedule won't come by the end of the week, which I understand with the Canadian situation. I don't know if that's even possible right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you can do is what's been reported, where you put out 2 or 3 weeks worth of fixtures, and it's Toronto versus Montreal, and Montreal versus Vancouver, and Vancouver against Toronto, and then everyone else in the USA plays against each other, and then hopefully you're in a better spot in mid-September. It is interesting that the case numbers at least are clearly now plateauing. It's a high plateau, but they clearly are plateauing. So we might, and again, this is very glass half full, but maybe we'll be in a slightly different position this time next month than we are right now. And it might be somewhat more realistic to pull off.
Fingers crossed. We'll have the twos tonight. Hopefully you'll be watching, Mike. Hopefully you'll see Tony Annan make his debut on the touchline.
Yeah, I really pumped for Tony tonight. Great opportunity for him. Very excited for him. And we'll talk about that and other things at 2 o'clock on Stoppage Time on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. We'll
be back with you then. Mike, thanks for hanging out this morning. Appreciate it.
See you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. So I got Harmless Bunny's question. I didn't get it at first. That's my bad. The idea of, and this came out afterwards, so it makes it a little bit tricky, but the comment about the Marlins and this idea about a text chain deciding if they should play or not, the protocols have to be cleaned up and followed. I don't know if the broadcasters are the ones who can make that decision to say, like, we shouldn't broadcast this team's games because they're not following protocols. This came out after the game on Sunday anyway. And in that case, it wasn't a national broadcast. It was a local, and the team is involved in that. They're not going to pull the plug on their own broadcast. Where it gets hard is the broadcasters are just there to cover the game that's there. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes there's an expectation that the announcers are supposed to feel a certain way or say certain things or whatever, and you have to understand, the role. The role is to call the game, and the role is, you're there on behalf of the team, or the league, or whatever, depending on your situation. National broadcasts are different, so that's tricky. In this case, the leagues, and especially if there was a breach of protocol in the way the Marlins handled things, or the way Major League Baseball handled things with their testing, or the team didn't do the things they're supposed to do, that has to be a league decision to punish the team. The broadcaster, and in this case, I don't know who the Marlins local broadcaster is. It doesn't matter. In their case, they can't penalize themselves, and it'd be them losing the ad revenue and them losing money from not showing it. And that's not fair to them because they had nothing to do with it. So that's the hard part about it. The leagues and this Marlins situation is going to be very interesting. I think what Mike said about the union coming out and saying, well, we're going to make sure that the Phillies get paid for the games that they should have played. We're going to make sure that the Nationals and the Orioles get paid for the games they're supposed to be played. Didn't say that about the Marlins.
Yeah.
That's a little telling because if they didn't follow protocols, no, they shouldn't get paid. Mm-hmm. And if the team has to make that good to players who did follow protocols and others didn't, or the team just didn't as a whole or whatever, then you're going to have issues with that team. But that's why these protocols are so important because it is about safety. And as I keep coming back to, because I see the conversation get twisted so often, the fear, I think on the outside a lot is, okay, the Marlins had positives and they didn't do a good job of this. Now the Phillies are in trouble. There's nothing to tell you that the Phillies are in trouble.
Right.
There has been no instance of that. It was the same thing with Rudy Gobert, and that was in March. Oh, no, you're going to have to quarantine all the teams the Jazz played over the last 2 weeks. There were no issues. You're not at risk. You're not at as much risk. Let me put it that way. You're at risk anytime. Just like you're at risk of getting hit by a car. We know that. You're at risk in any situation. But the risk of playing an opposing team is far less than the risk of transmitting it within your own team, because you're going to potentially have far more close interactions, as defined by the CDC, as defined by any organization worldwide. The risk of having more of those within your own team is far higher than in a game, in a match with an opposing team. And I think it always comes down to, now the Phillies are in trouble. Now then they could spread it over here. That's not how this goes. This is within your group. That's why at a party, when you have a party and you're increasing the risk of transmitting, it's because you're hanging out together. Right. People who went to that party, then going to the store, there's risk, but it's far less risk there. The risk is at the party. The risk is within your own team. It's not the competition. That's a critical element that keeps getting left out of this. Where are you seeing issues, whether it's a high school team, whether it's a college team, whether it's the Marlins, whether it's soccer teams like Dallas and Nashville? Where are you seeing these things happen? Within the team. Mm-hmm. It's not happening from competition. That needs to be understood. And teams have to follow the protocols for their own team. Yes, you increase the risk for others. You do, because you've increased the risk for yourself. But this fear that it's going to spread through competition, that's extremely low. Can it happen? Sure. But it's extremely low. The risk is because the team is not doing the right things, and that can come from the leadership of the team, that can come from the front office, that can come from the coaching staff, that can come from the players not following protocols. It can come from all of that. But the spread happens there. Now, how it started, you never know. And that's a very difficult part of this, because it could come, as people have said, it could come from a family member at home. It could come from a chance encounter pumping gas. It could come from a chance encounter at a store. Those things can happen. But you're doing all the things within your group to limit spread. So if that happens, it doesn't spread. The Atlanta United example is very important. And I know we mention it a lot. You have a positive test, you shut down team training. So that limits potential risk. You then have the individualized group training. People are separate. You're also still doing all the things when people show up. They're separate. They're not dressing, sitting around, talking, hanging out, chatting. You're keeping everybody separate. You're wearing masks. You're doing all those things you're supposed to do. But you have a positive test, you stop the team training because that's riskier. Then you make sure you confirm the test. You isolate the people who have tested positive. You keep them away from the group. Everybody else tests negative. You keep doing it. They had tested negative multiple times. Okay, you can go back to the team training. You're still testing, and you can adjust as needed, but you have limited risk. The Marlins, now my question is, if they started having positives, what did they do to limit the risk within their own group? Anything. We don't know. I think the teams where you're seeing this happen within a team, the questions have to be, what did you do when you knew you had a positive? What were your actions? And what have you been doing in general to set the expectation that we're going to limit risk? We're going to wear masks. We're going to stay separate. We're not going to hang out and share Cheez-Its on the bus. We're not going to sit and have dinner together and share a pizza. These kinds of things that can increase it. Are you limiting those activities? That's the question I have about all this. It's not so much playing a team that's had issues. It's what is that team doing within their own organization?
And I'll go back to, and you mentioned with Mike early on, the studies that were being done overseas. And the one that sticks out to me is always going to be the study from Great Britain, where with the new protocols in place, the interaction between players or among players at practice had even decreased by 30%, I think is the number that I remember correctly, when it came to the new protocols, the new practicing, and still trying to get your job done. So those kinds of things, and I love your idea about doing something like that for American football, just to see A, what it is, B, if there are adjustments, and then what is the interaction there in a practice situation, and then when you get into games and scrimmages, actually what is the level of contact and interaction between, say, the offensive and defensive lines, because that is constant contact for an entire game over 48 or 60 minutes of game time. I mean, that to me would be one of the areas where you should have the most attention sent because of how the game is played. And so I think that's a wonderful idea, and someone needs to jump on that just so we can get a base of information for American football and how to work around it.
All right, so Wall Pass Wednesday, we're getting close to the end, so you guys have questions, go ahead and fire them off so we can try to catch everything before we go. Lots of people hanging out watching on Twitch. Thanks for being part of the show this morning. Lots of people listening as well. You can chime in on Twitter and on email, soccerdownhere@gmail. Let me pull that up so I don't miss anything. Now's the time to fire off any remaining questions you have. You're pointing like you have a question.
Well, I have a Twitter moment from Bartimus Prime.
Okay. What we got?
And it has to do with one of the current restaurant discussions that we're having over the last handful of days.
Okay, save that because I think I know what it is. Was it somewhere I had dinner last night?
That is correct.
Okay, we're going to hold that. Captain Ragamuffin on Twitch. Would you rather Orlando? No, I think Captain's been with us before, I think.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Captain.
Ragamuffin.
Would you rather Orlando win this little tournament but lose every match the rest of the season or get pounded by L.A. But beat Atlanta United later this season?
Good Lord, it'd have to be the former.
Win the tournament. I'm fine with it. I don't care. They can win this tournament. They're good at winning made-up tournaments. They won their preseason made-up tournament and had a big moment with I don't know what the thing was. It looked like a giant ceremonial plate of some sort. So, yeah, they can win that. That's fine. It gets them into CONCACAF Champions League, which would be a hilarious experience. So I'm all in with that. Let's do it. Go Orlando, win the tournament, and then you lose everything else. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
I'd have no problem if Orlando beat LAFC in this next round either.
Yes, exactly.
I think it's going to be a better match than people are thinking, for sure.
Yeah, it's not like Oscar Pareja is the coaching equivalent to chopped liver here.
No, he's pretty good. He's a smart guy, and he's got his group ready to play and start singing.
I mean, dude.
I might just be playing that on a loop for the match. It could happen.
This is so awesome.
I would be entertained.
There is a difference between James O'Connor face and Oscar Pareja face. Let's put it that way.
Harmless Bunny says, nothing would be more MLS than them winning the MLS's back tournament than cratering in the regular season. That's true. That is very accurate.
Yes.
Any other questions on Twitter that we have not hit this morning? Except for the food one, because we'll get there to finish.
No, we're caught up on Twitter, sir.
All right. Give you guys a little more time. Let's go ahead and get into that. So, one thing today is National Wing Day.
Yes,
which I actually did not know that when I was planning my dinner yesterday. So, if you guys have heard this whole thing with Lewis Williams of the NBA, left the bubble in Orlando, came back to Atlanta, funeral. I think it was a friend. I don't know if it was a friend or a family member. But he was photographed by a local rapper at a certain establishment called Magic City. Mm-hmm. And that's probably not approved on the go home to the funeral side of things about leaving the bubble. That's going to open up some questions.
Yeah.
Well, Lou made it clear that he was going to pick up dinner. And a lot of people all over the country were like, Ricky Ricardo. It wasn't a local rapper? I thought it was. I thought Lewis was pictured with a local rapper. I might be wrong. Anyway, he's pictured with somebody posted on Instagram, and Instagram snitched on him, which is not good. Anyway, everybody around the country is like, oh, you're going to pick up dinner? Okay, yeah, right. At that establishment? Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, that yeah, whatever. they're kind of known for their food. And he's known for going there because he has wings named after him.
Yeah.
He has a special flavor at that place. Yes, it is a strip club, Abby. It is an adult establishment.
Yes,
and they are known for their wings. And
that I did not know. I honestly didn't.
I had heard that. I had never sampled it. It is an establishment I had never been in before.
Okay.
But what they have done, writing the publicity that has happened, is brilliant. They have, and I'm sure their business is down right now because, I mean, not as many people going out right now. They do pick up. They've done pick up before. But what they have added is, one, they're on social media now, and on the kitchen yes. side of it.
Yes.
Magic City Kitchen on Twitter, on Instagram. And they have signed up with Postmates, with
DoorDash,
that was the one I was trying to think of. I always mix up them for some reason.
Brings new meaning to the phrase DoorDash, doesn't it?
Yeah. They've partnered up with them, so you can sample the food without going to the establishment, which I'm not going to establishments of any sort right now. Period. So I wanted to try the wings, and I wanted to see, did Lou make this risk over nothing?
And?
They were really good. They were really good. They are, and I hadn't had wings in a little while, so my memories could be shrouded a little bit here, but they are the best wings that I've had.
Really?
They're that good. And I had the Lou Will special. It's barbecue lemon pepper, and it's perfect in terms of the blend. The wings are perfectly cooked. Sometimes you get some that are like kind of hard, and you didn't get any of that. They're all perfectly cooked. All the wings were good. The flats were good. The drums were good. It's barbecue with just the right amount of lemon pepper. Okay. Amazing. And there's other flavors that are supposed to be even better. But I had to sample it for Lou, get off Lou's back. The man wanted his wings. They're his wings, literally. His name's on the flavor. He wanted his wings. He's taken the 10-day quarantine for those wings. I can't say I blame the guy. Amazing. And DoorDash was great getting them here. It took a while because reportedly had a long line of people ordering.
That and you're not next door to this.
No, that had nothing to do with it. They had to take it offline multiple times because so many people are ordering right now. They are killing it right now. They have a ton of different flavors, Abby, so you can try anything different. Just make sure that DoorDash or Postmates is going to deliver to you from there.
Did you see last night during the NBA broadcast, Kevin Harlan actually requested those wings on the air?
I was dying because I'm like, well, I mean, he's kind of far away. That's a long trip for a DoorDasher or a Postmates driver, but it could happen. It could happen, and the packaging was great, and everything that they're doing right now is very cool. I love to see businesses getting creative and figuring this out, but man, those wings were legit. So when anybody starts with the whole like, oh yeah, right, whatever. No, they were that good. They were that good. I totally get it.
Because literally as you were showing us your delivery, Kevin Harlan is mentioning it during the game. And so there's this simultaneous synergy of events that's happening here. And, for me, I wouldn't put it past, if Harlan and the broadcast crew are in the bubble in Orlando, I could see at Magic City Kitchen.
Yeah. Show respect.
FedExing them down to Orlando to get them properly packaged and everything, so you don't lose any of the flavor or anything. Ready to heat. I could see them making that extra effort to FedExing. It's like the Adam's Rib episode of MASH. You're FedExing everything.
Quite that difficult, but yes.
But so I could see at Magic City Kitchen FedExing stuff to Kevin Harlan and Reggie Miller just so they can satisfactorily sample said wings. I don't put it past them.
I highly, highly recommend it. And next time, I think I'm going to try the catfish nuggets too because that sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not a fish person, so I will defer to you.
That's fine. I'll have them, and
you can have mine. I'll order some, and you can have them.
Sure. And thanks, Ricky. Jack Harlow, not Atlanta, Louisville. Okay, so not quite local, but everybody's local at Magic City, as Ricky says, and it's absolutely true.
Everybody's local.
Yes. No, it was great. And I love what they're doing with this opportunity. I love this city. I love Atlanta and how it is. So it's just, I love it.
Well,
All right.
And the fact that they actually retweeted you and your shout out.
Yeah, that was very cool. That was funny. I didn't expect that. No, they've been great. What's up?
Chris Kirshner says he spent a few hours in Magic City yesterday. And totally understand why at Team Lou 23 wanted wings from a strip club.
There's he wrote an article at The Athletic. You can go read that about his experience, and he said they're that good too. I'm with him. I'm with Lou.
Delight gave him a recommendation.
Yeah. No, there's on the site recommendations, and I might follow that recommendation for my next flavor choice. So, yeah, I am on board with Lou Williams in this whole situation. If he had to take a 10-day quarantine for those wings, man, I can't say I really blame him. I don't think he had the option to deliver at that point. Now you do, so you don't have to take that 10-day quarantine. You're good. And yes, I know some people would like to go to the establishment for other reasons, and that is fine too. Anyway, all right, let's get to the questions we have to wrap it up. Have a question about Christopher Abel asking, I think, if somebody's on my list. Anthony Hudson. Not on my list.
No.
Not on my list right now. I think is he still doing his podcast?
I think so. Yeah.
He was. I haven't been following. So, no, not on my list. Ricky asked if Atlanta United had wings when they made a visit. Allegedly, totally allegedly, just completely allegedly. There's nothing to show that happened.
There is no evidence to determine one way or the other what their menu items were.
Well, yeah, there's no. We don't know what they ate. That was the last thing people were looking for. So,
yeah.
I don't know. If they didn't, they missed out. I can tell you that much. No, Christopher Abel. No, Anthony Hudson. Please stop. You're going to break my brain. Kelsey says, was it a celebrity or celebratory level wing? It absolutely was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, if you accomplish something, yes, you should have these wings. I am in. And it's the ones I had, again, it's barbecue and lemon pepper. And I had never seen that combination. You see lemon pepper wet, but this is barbecue. But it's perfectly blended. So on board. Kefsi is trying to accomplish a Timbits and Magic City Kitchen exchange.
That's an interesting mix.
Yeah, I mean, I like Timbits. I would not. Now, again, you have the delivery option now, so you don't have to risk the quarantine if you are so inclined, and I was so inclined last night. But let's say that didn't happen because I don't think Timbits can be delivered on these apparatus. On the apparatus. So if I want Timbits, I'm not risking a quarantine to go get the Timbits. I might think about it in this case and mask up and do everything possible to avoid it. But yeah, these wings are that good. They're so much better. Let's see.
You mentioned this morning when we were having our pre-flight about Aitor Karanka, and I guess we can take him off the list.
Well, not completely yet. He's got a circle around his name on the list right now because it looks like he is headed to Birmingham City, correct?
Yes. Set to a point is the wording from BBC.
Dome Tarrant has a giant circle and maybe a highlighter around him as well right now. Looks like he's going to be announced as the manager of Flamengo in Brazil. So that's two names off the list that were on the list. Tim Cahill added to the list. So we have a new one on the list.
We're at a net -1.
Yes. Abby thinking honey garlic in terms of the wing flavor she's going to check out. That's a good one. The honey jerk is the one that I think is going to be my next one, along with the catfish nuggets. And Tesco, I agree, although you got to do this later. They should bottle the sauce and ride out the publicity.
Yes.
Wait a while, because right now you are killing it with the delivery.
Yes. Make sure that when you have the dip in demand, then that's when you sit there and you come up with the new element of, hey, here's your sauce. Right now, demand is exceeding supply. So when those numbers start to even out in Econ 101, that's when you sit there and you come up with all the other elements that are associated with it.
be patient if you're going to order. Like, it took a while for them to come up as available to order for me because they're so slammed. It's a tiny kitchen, as you learn in the Athletic article. So they get backed up. Going to have to be patient. Be patient once you put the order in. It took about 2 hours from the time I put the order in to actually get it because they were so backed up. So be patient. When you see it's available, go for it. It's like the hot light at Krispy Kreme. When it's time, it's time. And go ahead and put it in, but then be patient and wait for it to show up. Colonel, excited about this afternoon. I'm sure John is excited about this afternoon. A ticket to Wembley awaits for the Swans, eh?
Well, yep. Right now they're up a goal, and Brentford is missing one of their midfielders who picked up a red in the first leg. Right now, Brentford to win is minus 169. Swansea is a plus 462. I say that you grab as many double-decker buses as humanly possible to make sure that you can get out of there with the 1-goal advantage, if not more.
Do you need to park the bus like that against the Swansea? Need to park buses like that?
Hey, we're up 1-0. Right now, it's cutthroat. The idea is right now playing Fulham. And
I don't like the idea of parking buses like that, though.
Hey, right now, it's get to Wembley. Do what you got to do. You got a 1-goal lead. Should have been more. Do what you got to do.
There's got to be a better way. Ricky Ricardo, about our conversation at the end of yesterday's show, 8 CONCACAF teams in 26. Rob Stone did clarify his tweet. That is not a definite. Looks like 6 is the definite, and 2 might go into a playoff. And it's more of CONCACAF's president lobbying and trying to get there. So Rob's initial tweet, I don't know if he had all the information. He clarified, looks like 6, which is realistic. 6 makes more sense with 2 going into playoffs. I think that's going to be one thing we see out of the increased numbers in the World Cup is more interconfederational playoffs. Put a European spot on the line with Africa or CONCACAF or whatever. You're going to see more of those. And I think it's going to end up replacing the Confederations Cup, which is fine. That's pretty compelling. You get 2 teams put them in a one-off in a neutral site. Winner goes to the World Cup. I'm in. I'm watching. That's going to be great. Okay. Let's see. Lots of conversation about dinner last night. That's funny. Mm-hmm. Jason, I don't think they have that option for you. Sorry, I apologize. They might in other states, according to some. That's entertaining. Colonel asked about Cahill's coaching certification. It's not showing up elsewhere. Everton Academy is the only experience that he sees, and that's all I know of as well. That's why when we were talking about ranking the rumors, that's why it's low on the list for me, because I just don't think there's much on the table. And we've mentioned Carlos Puyol as well. He was brought up before as somebody that the team was talking to. It wasn't what everybody was reporting. It was what some were reporting. And he hasn't really gone down the road of coaching since the end of 2018 either. So I think this is a job that needs somebody who has a steady hand through experience. I think it's a very tough job to walk into without managerial experience. Yeah. So I think Cahill would be a long shot. He would have to dominate the interview, and he would have to show that he can overcome that lack of experience. The certification part, I'm not sure where he stands, but it's more the experience for me. I just don't think he has a whole lot, and it's going to be tough. Colonel's yelling at you, John, and I'm with Colonel on this one. No buses will be parked. Cooper has said as much. Stupid to defend one of the highest-scoring teams in the league for 90 minutes, and I completely agree. Stop being scared, John. You got a dog. You don't even need to get a dog. Stop being scared. You don't win scared.
I ain't being scared.
Yes, you are. You're saying park the bus. You're saying your team's not good enough. You park the bus when you're not good enough.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Sir.
That's 100% what you said. Park the bus. I just want to get there. Park the bus.
I want to get there, whatever it takes.
You park the bus when you don't have what it takes. Why do you think Cincinnati parked the bus?
Because they don't have what it takes.
So are you saying your squad doesn't have what it takes?
Not saying that at all.
No, it is what you're saying. It's exactly what you said. You said park the bus.
I said that because I want to get to the next round. I'm not saying that we can't compete against Brentford as we did at home in leg 1.
You lose when you park the bus,
I want
sir.
to get to Wembley.
You lose when you park the bus. You don't come in scared. Now, you get to the 75th minute, and you haven't found a goal, different conversation. Completely different conversation. You shut up shop at some point. That's fine. That's not parking the bus. You need another goal. You have a 1-goal lead, right?
Yep, 1 goal, should have been 2, missed a PK.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. You got a 1-goal lead. That's not good enough.
Nope.
You need another one, then you can just play.
And like I said, I think that with Brentford missing one of their key midfielders after getting the second yellow, I think that'll be big. Maybe they can get some stuff done in the middle of the park.
Well, you're saying park the bus. So, Colonel, give this man a pep talk before kickoff so he's not all like antsy and stuff when we get to Atlanta United 2 tonight.
I'm going to say I'll be watching from the press box at the Fraction. I'll be watching the match.
Yeah, don't be park the bus, park the bus, park the bus. Don't turn into Yop Stom on me, please.
Eesh.
You're the one saying park the bus?
Yops, yeah, but not Yop Stom style. That to me just means you're completely and totally outgunned.
That's parking the bus. If you want to defend and counter, different conversation. That's not parking the bus. If you want to be more conservative coming into this because you have the lead, that's fine. But you have to have a way to play. That's not parking the bus.
Then we'll defend and counter and work the middle of the pitch. How about that?
I think you just play because I think you're the better team. So you play. You're smart. You don't risk quite as much, but you play, and if you control the ball, you control the game. So just see the thing out and get to Wembley. That's what you got to do.
And play Fulham probably.
Saturday night, if you haven't seen this, Soccer in the Streets is doing an appreciation event for Michael Parkhurst. It is remote. It is from 7 to 9 p.m. It's presented by us. I'll be hosting it. Creature Comforts is also presenting it. And email Eric, ERIK, at soccerstreets.org for information on how you can grab the spotlight and have a conversation in this event with Parky. So Parky will be joining us remotely. I'll be probably right here. So we'll be having this conversation and showing Michael Parkhurst appreciation for his time here in Atlanta. It's a cool fundraiser for Soccer in the Streets as well. Go check out at Soccer Streets for the information on that, and you've got time to get in on it. So get the information, come join us on Saturday night, and show some love to Parky.
A couple of other numbers real quick. In the USL Championship tonight, Indy 11 -213 hosting Hartford Athletic. We saw Andrew Carlton ball out over the weekend in the match against St. Louis. Lou City -222 going up against Sporting Kansas City 2. That one's at 8 o'clock. Sporting KC 2 is a +449. 3 matches in the Western Conference. Los Dos are +120 against San Diego Loyal, who are +177. Reno 1868 at Portland Timbers 2 are a -115. Sacramento Republic +124 up against Orange County SC, who's a +174.
All right. Later today, 2 o'clock, facebook.com/929thegame for stoppage time. Mike and I will be hanging out talking rumors and silly season and how silly it's going to get.
How silly is it?
Robin Williams and Morgan Mindy silly? That's pretty silly.
It's pretty silly.
I think it's going to be fairly silly. Right now I'm there. It could get sillier, which I don't know how I'm going to define yet. I'll have to think about it. We'll see how weird it gets. That's at 2 o'clock for an hour, facebook.com/929thegame. And then I will be shortly after that hopping in a car and driving up north, and John's going to beat me there, it sounds like. So he can sit there and be yelling to park the bus at Swansea, which is craziness. Hopefully they win, so he's not in a bad mood for the game, because that would be bad for the broadcast. It's at 7:30 on ESPN Plus. Atlanta United 2 and the Miami FC.
The Miami FC.
We're going to have to
Mario Williams to the Atlanta United airwaves.
Yep. That'll be 7:30 ESPN Plus. Tony Annan's debut as interim manager for Atlanta United 2. Expecting another young squad. Expecting to see good things from Coleman Gannon and others. It's going to be a fun one. So join us on ESPN Plus at 7:30. Join us for stoppage time, 2 o'clock. Facebook.com/929thegame. I'll see if I can find another platform to hop on at some point today.
Yeah.
Probably not. And we'll be back tomorrow to wrap up everything from today. We'll talk at 2s. We'll talk more silly season because I'm sure there'll be more. We'll talk about everything else. Not betting anything, not touching anything. And we'll talk to y'all in a little bit. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.